So let's say you run an e-commerce business, and we live in a world where all of the data about your business, all the marketing data, anything in your customer data platform is all connected to a large language model. And now you're able to start interacting with that data through natural language. Imagine that you're just sitting down and you want to understand how your business is doing. So we've got some of the data sources kind of loaded up here, and I've asked it to just kind of quickly review what's in its knowledge base. This is a custom GPT with some custom instructions and some custom data sets. And we can just start asking it some questions. So let's try this. GPT, could you compare the marketing revenue generated in July to that generated in August this year? Okay, so I'm taking a look at the marketing revenue generated from July and August. A little concerning, right? Big dip. So let's ask about that. Hey GPT, looks like a pretty big dip between the revenue generated in July and August. Could you take a closer look at the data and maybe come up with a hypothesis as to why the revenue dipped so much? All right. So if you look at what ChatGPT's done here, is it's basically broken down overall revenue into like various input metrics, right? So if you want to understand whether it's the open rate or the click-through rate or the placed order rate, all of these things have different implications for what might be going on, right? If your open rates dropped, then it might be an issue with the email subject lines. If your click-through rates dropped, it might be an issue with the content. If your placed order rates dropped, it might be an issue with the landing experience. And so what it's done is it's calculated these various input metrics, and you can see for yourself that click-through rate is the big culprit here, right? Click-through rate went from 3% in July down to 1.8%. You did not see very big dips in open rate. So people were opening and they just weren't clicking through as much. And, slight drops in placed order rate and then consequent impact on average order value and revenue per recipient. So this does appear as like the number one hypothesis, right? Under this reduced engagement line, it says the significant drop in click-through rate indicates reduced engagement, right? And it says, obviously, like, could be due to less compelling content. That's kind of obvious. So now what we want to do is start to try to see if it can understand what might be going on with the content of those messages that resulted in the lower click-through rate. Thanks, GPT. Can we take a closer look at the content of the campaigns that were live in July and August and maybe see if we can understand why the engagement was so much lower in July or in August, rather? Mm-hmm. All right. So, with a few questions, we were able to get at the fact that we were running big sales in July that weren't live in August, right? And it's you can easily see that from like the names of some of the top campaigns and the performance that was driven by those. So let's check against a manual analysis to see if the model's hallucinating at all. So this is a manual Tableau dashboard that has the same data set, right? And so if we kind of follow the logic here, we see, hey, really big dip in August compared to July, 45% dip in revenue. Was it because we sent fewer messages? No, because we sent more. So, what happens when we look at the secondary metrics? All right, big drops in click-through rate. Was it from campaigns or our automated messages? The bulk of it is due to campaigns. And so when we start to get into actually looking at the campaign names, this tells the story, right? We've got these big clearance sales and discount promotions that are live in July and not in August. So, the model got it, right? And it took a lot less time than combing through the data and building the Tableau dashboard. It was just answer with a handful of questions. All right, so let's see if we can do a little bit of data visualization with this. Hey GPT, I'm interested in understanding more about my top performing campaigns. Could you take a look at the campaigns only and show me the top 10 by revenue per recipient? Thanks, GPT. Can you render the above table as a bar chart with revenue per recipient on the x-axis? Thanks. Could you swap the vertical and horizontal axis? Awesome. And could you overlay some dots that show like total deliveries for each of these campaigns that adhere to their own scale on the right-hand axis? All right. So let's compare this against what we see in a manual analysis, right? So we've got clearance sale up to 50% off is the big one, 89 cents revenue per recipient. And then this is a good one to compare against early access to our sale, revenue per recipient around 30 cents, but the deliveries were very low. Do we see that in our manual analysis? Yep, we do. So it looks like it's good data, it's not hallucinating. And if you take a look at this, you can start to piece together a story of what might be happening here, right? So, for instance, these two messages were sent, they both have similar messaging to a similar number of recipients. But I bet if you bring in date time, this was sent on the 21st and this was sent on the 22nd, right? So it starts to make sense. Like this was the first big blast announcing their 50% off sale, and then this was sent again the next day. But so this starts to tell a good story, and we didn't have to put together a Tableau data viz to tell it. We could just ask it to kind of piece it together for us. So let's say we're heading into October now, and I want to understand kind of what I could learn from last year's seasonal trends to better prepare for this year. So I want to understand, what product categories we started to see an increased demand for in October last year. So I can ask it, hey GPT, so based on trends from 2022, can you tell me what product categories you'd expect to increase in sales in September of 2023? Thanks. Could you plot a chart that shows the percent increase in orders in each of those categories in September 2022 compared to the prior month? Thanks. Could you swap the X and Y axis? Nice. How about recreating the chart above, but for all product categories in the data set? And make sure to use color codes where appropriate. All right, so let's take a look at this. So it's plotted the percent increase, right? So this is zero. Anything to the left is coded in orange, which is a decrease in sales heading into September, and anything in blue is an increase in sales heading into September. So we've got men's athletic outerwear, men's dress, men's long sleeve or women's long sleeve t-shirts. Let's compare this against a manual analysis and see if it checks out. All right, men's athletic, men's dress, women's long sleeve t-shirt, men's jackets. So yeah, this looks pretty much the same as what we're seeing over here. So this is great. I mean, this means that we're basically able to get a quick data viz that shows which product categories we'll see increased demand for a given period of time or a given seasonal period. And we did it all through natural language. I didn't have to construct a complex Tableau data viz. Okay, so let's say, now that you see that, certain things are going to increase in demand, maybe you want to understand some of the co-purchasing trends around a category so you can make sure that your post-purchase marketing messages are kind of dialed in with good cross-sell recommendations. So let's say something like men's athletic outerwear. Let's ask the LLM, hey GPT, for orders that contained an item from men's athletic outerwear, what product types are most often purchased by the same customer in the same cart? Right, so this is kind of your classic market basket analysis, right? It's taking a look at anything where there all orders where there was a purchase of a given product category and seeing what other categories are most frequently purchased. So you can imagine, hey, if somebody buys something from men's athletic outerwear, maybe you want to send them a follow-up message with men's t-shirts and jackets, since that's the stuff that people most often co-purchase alongside it. So you can start to see that if you have a lot of different types of data connected to the LLM, it starts to open up some very interesting and if you put the right guardrails on, very accurate and kind of trustworthy analysis through natural language, right? Without the need to be kind of switching back and forth between different programs and learning how to use data viz. So this is pretty powerful, and it's something that, if you follow the right steps, you can really make it sing. But there's a lot that goes into that. Right now it's a lot of, making sure the data dictionaries with the data set are really clear, providing the LLM with custom instructions and sort of pre-programming it with the data viz best practices so it knows how to render things. And also just, understanding how to talk to it, and ultimately, making sure that your prompts are interpretable by the LLM. So this is kind of the state of the state, and I'll do a follow-up video that goes into more detail as to how we kind of got the results that we did here.